Hello, and welcome to Property Matters. 40 minutes of lively chat and debate around all matters property, designed to be of interest to those with an interest in the property market. Property Matters is sponsored by Fairview International, Property Consultancy, and Town and Country Property Auctions London. Got an action-packed show for you lined up this Sunday, and of course, we'd love your input and contribution to the show. In the discussion this morning, we'd love you to put your comments in the comments section below, or if you'd rather, of course, you can email us propertymatterstv@gmail.com. Joining us, as always, our resident property expert, Joe Joshi. Joe, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Paul, and good morning to our lovely audience. And thank you very much for your contributions throughout the week, comments from our previous programs, and of course, ideas that you would like us to discuss. So looking forward to yet another. I just hope you've not got so many graphs this week, Paul. You know, I know you like your...
I do love a good graph, you know that.
I know you enjoy throws your graphs at me, so I'll try and work the yo-yo section on that for you.
So it's our first programme out of lockdown. Have you noticed any difference? I mean, obviously the property market's been working through lockdown, so how's things been?
To be perfectly honest with you, I think throughout this year, the whole yo-yo of in and out of lockdown and the tier system, or as you rightly said earlier on, the tiers in Basil Brush's mind was a different way of looking at it, and he's just not sure which one he needs to wipe anymore. But so we come out of one lockdown and then we go into a different tier system, which has created yet another type of lockdown. But nevertheless, the property market has been resilient to all so far in 2020. And much debate has continued over what we love the most is our home, the bricks and mortar, and the best subject on the dinner table, apart from one or two others, of course, property.
Yes, I did enjoy Basil Brush's comment in the week. All this tier system is driving me to tears. I thought that was quite funny on the news in the week, if you saw that. Let's move into our news stories this week, and we've got a few for you, I'm afraid, but there's not too many graphs, but it's interesting nonetheless because Hackney is the first local authority to actually say that they're going to be unable to complete the local authority searches for those first-time buyers looking to beat the stamp duty holiday on the 31st of March. And this, Joe, is a specific case because it's due to a cyber attack and it's completely closed the property market in Hackney. But there is a warning there that people do have to get their skates on, isn't there?
Yes, I think that that clock has been ticking, and after the Chancellor's statement, I think people were hoping and wishing and praying that he was going to extend the stamp duty period. But we know in 2020, the government has had many surprises for us. So let's hope that they have another one sometime in February, that they will consider extending the stamp duty holiday, primarily to get people over this opportunity of buying and selling their properties before the deadline of the 31st of March 2021.
Yes, and of course there is a considerable groundswell of support for an extension at the moment, and I think some a petition going around that is to try and get the holiday extended.
I think there's a lot of petitions going around, to be perfectly honest with you, and I think people have got time to go with that, and I think rightly so, where this is concerned in terms of extension. But I think it's apart from the petition, Paul, I think it's just a logical business sense, and governments run the country like a business in some ways. It's maybe not what we are happy with, but then that's the case with a lot of business decisions that we also make in our own lives, in our own family lives as well. There are some decisions that we have to make that we're not particularly happy to make, but sometimes that's the way it goes. And I'm hoping that the petition will obviously throw its weight behind the desire for the extension, and hopefully the government will see sense that it too has to also understand that, why fix a problem that hasn't actually broken, and whilst it's working well and helping the economy and the country and the people and keeping it moving, then they should probably adhere to that advice. But wait and see.
It's actually quite ironic, really, because Hackney unable to complete any of the deals now for the 31st, but they are the 6th most popular place and best place as a hotspot to buy a first-time property. So this week, a very useful and interesting list of the top 20 first-time buyer hotspots, Joe. So looking at the list here, if you live in Luton, or if you're thinking of buying in Luton, then you're going to get the best return on your investment. Wolverhampton in there, Barking and Dagenham. And interesting for us at the bottom of that 20, but still in the 20, Hounslow, Slough and Reading. Any thoughts on this?
Well, if you look at the structure of all of that, Paul, all of those are now outside our big city of London, which tells you that in consideration of the pandemic and the way people's mindsets are and the process that they're thinking, how it works, it's clearly showing that people are thinking about moving further out in terms of not just investment, but also their home and their lifestyle. And so, yeah, subsequently, I'm not surprised to see any of those on the list. And of course, Hackney, might have creeped into that top slot because, they just want to sort of make sure that it's tougher to get the searches done. No, I'm only joking. I just I just think that, these are all about, the right location. And it's always said, isn't it, in the property world, location is everything. But in this case, it's probably part of our whole rethink that has happened in 2020 for all of us, as to, what is the right thing for us and as our family.
It's interesting to look at some of those prices. We did touch on this a week or two ago, actually, Joe. But if you look at some of those prices there, so for example, if you did consider moving to the West Midlands, I mean, there's a lot more for your money, isn't there? In the sense of 145,000, 160,000 for those with low deposits. Say, they've got 10%. They've got, it's not unreasonable for a first-time buyer to have sort of 15, 16, 20 grand in the bank. And therefore, it makes the deal quite doable, doesn't it? If you could think about moving to somewhere like the West Midlands, for example.
It's a hot spot. These are hot spots now. The north of England has become quite a bit of a hot spot. Going north, period, has become quite a bit of a hot spot in terms of communication, transportation. But like I said, the fact that people have had to now, consider readjusting their working life, it's made those more attractive and more viable. So, perhaps this time next year or sometime during the next year, we will see that the house prices would have increased in those, because it's always about supply and demand, Paul. It's always about where people want to be. And obviously what pushes house prices up is about the supply against the demand of what people want to do. And if people are constantly looking to move out and looking at those areas, then naturally there's going to be a general increase in house prices. And that is a good thing, and a good thing in the sense that, it shows that whatever investment people make, be it a home or be it a house or be it a buy-to-let property in those areas, it's good for them to sort of consider using that as their investment base as well.
And Reading at 260,000 for a two-bed flat, that looks a pretty good deal.
Yes, it's more attainable just outside. When you think that in the city at one time, in the height of the market, a two-bedroom property was fetching over £1 million, and some of those obviously creep back a little bit. But the reality is, it's about affordability and where you want to be and the quality of life. And I think this year that has probably been a big underline in most people's life. It's about quality of life. As to what you want to try and achieve and where you want to go. So yeah, Reading is fantastic. And we are very blessed to be in some of the nicer country side locations in the country, as I always say, because when you think about Buckinghamshire, Berkshire, Surrey, Hertfordshire, all these sort of outskirts of going all the way around. If you want to go around the M25, even Essex and Kent. I mean, I just had a couple of days out in Colchester, and it was snowing, and I took some pictures and I posted those out when it was snowing. And talk about countryside. I mean, the whole thing is in the country, and felt I should have sort of invested a tractor in part of that day. But it's amazing what is out there when you actually take that trip and find out what is available and what a lifestyle and how lovely it was to actually physically see that. So I can't blame people, once you've had that taste, to be able to go out there and enjoy the fresh air and enjoy the benefits of what the country has to offer.
It's very much a buyer's market at the moment, and I'm pleased to say there is more good news in the sense that the lenders seem to be sensing this, and they're very much back in the market, hungry for business with new higher loan-to-value mortgage products. So now there are 80 mortgage products, would you believe, with 90% loan-to-value, Joe, and even 8 offering 95%. So this has got to be great news for anyone looking to get into that, beat that stamp duty holiday.
Yes, and I think not too late in coming forward for those lenders. I think they've realised that it is the housing market that is going to continue to sustain some of the stability in the country, and great to see that. I mean, Boris Johnson did obviously, sort of reach out to lenders and say that they need to start to provide, sort of 95% lower deposit mortgages, and obviously they've followed the leader and said, okay, let's see what's out there. But the reality of it is that yes, it makes it much more viable, much more interesting for first-time buyers. And as you rightly say, in some parts of the country, the deposits are as little as less than £20,000. But equally, bear in mind that in some of those areas where the prices are below a certain point, there is also zero stamp duty that is available. So it's a great time to have that combination of low interest, low borrowing percentage, loan to value borrowing, and of course, no stamp duty. There's probably never a better time than now to invest in property, in spite of the fact that we are in a pandemic time. The opportunity presented for all those wish to be in property is fantastic.
Yeah, we have mentioned that actually in certainly last week we talked about this, didn't we? Because despite the pandemic, it's actually been quite a record year, and that leads us nicely into our final topic in the news this week, which is the fact that although the bounce back in the property market is not going to be the V that everyone expected, it's going to be more like the Nike swoosh, so right the way down, but then a very solid but more gradual return. And it's interesting to see that this is going to be the year when we top 1 million contract deals within the year. And that's the best since 2016. And that's been credited to the stamp duty holiday. But it's interesting to see that in 2016, we also had a window to beat for, I think it was the 3% on the buy-to-lets, wasn't it, Joe? And this is going to prove to be the best year since then. So the government's brought its old trick out the bag again and rescued the housing market and made it a very good year.
And I've constantly said on this program and during my time that the government has the property market is what it uses as its yardstick. It constantly has used that throughout all the years that I've been in it, whether it's through raising or decreasing interest rates in line to try and get the best rates. They've increased them to put the brakes on, and this time they've used the stamp duty as their yardstick. In 2016, they put the clock on for those that wanted to do buy-to-let. So before the 3% came in on the next property, and that boosted it. And here, they've done it with the stamp duty deadline for the 31st of March, and created that whoosh, that new graph that you love actually putting in there.
See, there's my graph.
here's your graph. I knew that would come in sooner or later. And so to show that it's going to have a tick. But my personal view is that 2021 is going to be a fairly solid year for property, given the foundations that are now created, which we've just mentioned, and that is that loan to value. There are opportunities for first time buyers ranging from 95% upwards, and obviously the lower interest rates that is out there, and potentially the stamp duty. And if you look at the areas that you want to move to, especially if you decide to further your interest into the other parts of the country where value for property is lower, then your likelihood to have no worry about stamp duty, in all honesty, because that stamp duty deadline wouldn't matter, because it was going to fall into no stamp duty territory anyway. So I think, whilst there's this sort of fear being put in about the stamp duty, look at the areas that there is going to be no stamp duty, irrespective of 31st of March 2021. There will be, if you're looking at £250,000 generally as a property that you're going to buy, that was below stamp duty figures anyway. So going towards the north, Luton, etc., that still provides you with no stamp duty over and above past the 31st of March 2021.
Interesting that October is turning out to be a record month in 2020. We had 124,000 deals done, I believe, and the record number of mortgage approvals, 97,500 mortgage approvals. So there's some 25,000 deals that are not requiring any financing at all. So suggests there's a little bit of activity maybe in the buy-to-let market.
Yes, and I repeat myself time and time again about your best investment is in bricks and mortar. And I think people look at that and realize that money sitting in an account earning pretty much no interest is probably better invested in a property where potentially there's a potential capital gain, perhaps long term in its value. But moreover, they can rent it out and there is a better return. In some cases, that's providing anything from 4, 5, 6%, 7%, up to 10% on their investment, especially if you're buying something, at 150, 200,000 pounds, and you're beginning to sort of get somewhere between 800 and 1,000 pounds worth of rental back in some parts of the country. You're getting a great return on your investment. So that's why the people that have had cash sitting in their bank account wondering what to do have probably started to think, well, actually, this is a great time for me to maybe reinvest and put it into property. You're never going to be at fault putting whatever time, whatever energy you put into property. And in the history that I've had, I can only go back and say time and time again, it's the best investment that people will make, be it as an investment to rent out or move in as a residential, whichever way it looks at it, will be the right thing to do. And there are now some good commercial investments available, irrespective of this week, a carnage on the high street, Paul, of brands and history that you've grown up with, who have just come to a decimation, in 24 hours. And all of a sudden, you've got to rethink. And those properties that may become vacant, someone somewhere will use those as investments and get other things. So there's never a dull moment in property.
And a good time to get involved. And actually, going back to the top 20 list of hotspots, and just moving away from first-time buyers for a second, looking at those areas, we did identify that there are some interesting areas there that would make good economic sense. So if I was looking to take on my first property, maybe I've bought my own house, but I'm looking to buy a buy-to-let property, is it realistic for me as a first-time buy-to-letter, shall we say, just literally going up to Wolverhampton, having a look round, choosing a property? I mean, what are the pitfalls? Because many people might be thinking, well, there's an opportunity for me there. But is it as easy to get rich quick, or is it a little bit more involved?
I think everyone should always take the right precautions, think about where it is that they're looking to invest. There are so many get rich quick schemes available, and if you search the net nowadays, there's somebody at some street corner who's prepared to tell you that they're going to make you the returns the best that they can, and that may be the case. Sometimes a united force might give you a smaller yet more consistent return, as opposed to the one that you can do all by yourself. But the basics that you've got to continue to look at all the time are its location, its feasibility. Look at the costs of service charges that some of these people would have put in place for new properties. Look at the whole outlay, the whole cost of what it's going to actually give you on the return. But location is key in any buy-to-let program, and it's attractive that sometimes you buy something which is quite cheap in the middle of nowhere, but find that you've got lesser people that are likely to want to rent that. So you may have a larger void period where it might then suit somebody who's decided to go there for 6 months, a year, maybe 2 years, and then the next person you won't find for another 6 months. So, it's very important to understand that if you're going to go down the buy-to-let market, you're going to go down to an investment, location is very, very important, and make sure that a property that is going to be able to be attracted to the new renters, the new younger generation. And that's where investment by landlords is crucial. They need to update and modernize as much as they can in order to attract the new tenants that are likely to have young people that are going to go out and getting jobs, who are not interested in worrying about going and decorating it, being trendy and so forth. They want something that is kind of funky and modern and quick, and they can get their pizza down the road and go to get their kebabs or whatever they want to do. They just want convenience and easiness, and that's something that every landlord should seriously think about when they are looking at investment, no matter where it is in the country.
Well, Hackney is featured very prominently in the show this week, and it is the 6th most desirable place for first-time buyers. And I'm pleased to say that Town and Country Property Auctions has a Hackney property for investment as Property of the Week this week. A welcome return of this feature. Joe, do you want to talk us through? I think this is a doctor's surgery or a dentist or something, isn't it? Or was?
So yeah, this is a very nice property that we've got on our books going into the auction for the 15th of December. It's a 2-story end of terrace type of property in Hackney, very residential in that area, and currently it has a D1 usage, and a D1 usage normally sort of follows with doctor surgeries, day nurseries, dentists, and that kind of interest. But because on 2 floors, it's about 1,500 square feet, almost average, about 750 square feet each on each floor. And then there's of course the scope under the current permitted development rights, and of course the government's policy that potentially, because it's flat roofed, that there might be scope to go up another floor, maybe 2, subject to the planning. So great investment. We're guiding at £800,000 at the moment, and good interest on this property. And being Hackney, I will have to check, but it may be that this particular property is held in a SPV, a special purchase vehicle, which means that our client may have bought it in a particularly separate limited company. And if that's the case, then there will be a saving in stamp duty rather than worrying about the timescale for the 31st. So, but you can log in to townandcountrypropertyauctions.co.uk, drop down to London, click on the particular lot, which is lot 14, and register for the legal pack, and be happy to discuss that with anybody that is genuinely out there interested. And it's a great investment. I mean, you work it out, you turn it into 2 flats alone is a good return, but the scope is that maybe you get another couple on above it.
And this presumably is going to be someone with, or ideal for someone with a reasonable level of experience of doing these kind of conversions.
Yes, and then it's not so much the internal conversion is not probably going to be the biggest issue at all. I think going above may be the question. But Paul, it's quite interesting how going above properties has become the norm now, because a lot of the upper floors are actually constructed elsewhere and then just literally plonked on top as sort of mansard roof flats and so forth. So quite interesting how people are making things work and making it modern in its own ways. But if it's not for somebody who wants to turn it into flats, a little school, a little nursery, or a dental surgery, an osteopath or whatever, it's got great, and location-wise, it's super location, not far from the common, which has got swings and parks and so forth. And I think a great investment. So not one to be missed, in my opinion.
Interesting, and great to see Property of the Week back again. Joe, last topic, our main topic of conversation this week, we're going to talk about succession planning. So we've talked about first-time buyers, we've talked about people buying buy-to-lets, people who maybe have a property portfolio. Whatever the situation, if you have property that you own, at some point in your life, you'll need to think about what to do with that property. Should I leave it to members of the family? Should I dispose of it? So succession planning is clearly important, but it's obviously something that we always leave until often it's too late, but we should get on with it now.
Yes, this is an interesting subject, and a subject I think was sort of discussed by a couple of people that recently I've been dealing with. And circumstances, really, I suppose. When you think about the scenario where we are in our life this year alone, it's really made people stop and think about what should happen or shouldn't happen going forward. So, with the best will in the world, we are all going to be immortal and live forever and a day. But the reality is that we know that is not the case. And I suppose none other time in time of our history than the pandemic, when we've lost many loved ones, many families have lost members, and circumstances that perhaps they just never thought was going to happen. And all of a sudden, it highlights a lot of issues that I think are very, very important to bring to our program and actually share with and give ideas. Now, I have to say that, I'm not an expert in advising financial advice and what are the correct things. But what I can say to you, having the number of years of experience, I'm happy to discuss and point people in the right direction, and tell them who they need to go and speak to and what they need to do potentially to make the right decisions, or at least steps towards the right decisions in terms of what they might need to do if someone was to do. So, for example, let's talk about some examples. So if somebody passes away now and have no plan, have no structure, the family may think that they've got some amazing opportunities here that have been left by their dear beloved parent, family, friend, uncle, auntie, doesn't really matter who it is, granny, and now this is something that they can all have. What they have to understand is that prior to them getting what they think is their share, there's a whole bunch of things that will probably need to be dealt with. And of course, one of them is our lovely friend, the tax man, who will turn around and say that some of that is mine, actually, because there are death duties, and there may be a CGT, capital gains tax, and there are other taxes that may need to be dealt with. Now, some of those things can be mitigated depending on how you structure, and that's why succession planning is something that every person should, at some stage of their life, think about. And the same as wills. Wills are something that you should put in place, not only just because of your asset, but also perhaps of your family. So, for example, let's say someone passes and they've left some little child behind. The question is, what happens to that child? Who looks after it? Where do they go? Would that child end up with social services? Does somebody put up a fight to ask that question? Now, I've had a client very recently who I won't say who and where and how, but it was an interesting journey that they had. And the journey was that basically, out of the blue, their daughter was unfortunately murdered by her husband. So subsequently, that then put in the fact that they had a child left. The husband obviously got life imprisonment. The daughter is now no longer there. And the poor child was having to go through a nightmare to try and find out where that person's future was going to be. And because it happened so suddenly, there was no structure. And so the parents, the grandparents and so forth ended up having to put up a huge fight to try and do the right thing for the welfare and the future of that child, of their daughter. And of course the fight was done from the inside for the other chap, for the father, who said that his parents and his family will be the right people to look at and so forth. And it kind of brought it home at that point to sort of think, you were leaving the life of the people that you love in someone else's hand altogether, the courts, the social services, etc., to make a decision. And you can take those steps way ahead, even if you put something in writing with and I think one of the best places and best times to do that personally, Paul, is that when somebody buys their home or they're doing a transaction, they should take a page or two and put in place their thoughts about their future, of what they think would happen if anything was to happen to either person, if they're a joint or married, or whatever the circumstance. Even if they're single, who would they want to be in charge? Which member of family they might have that confidence in? If not, who. So sometimes people I've come across recently where a lady, bless her, she had the same scenario. Her husband passed away, but she entrusted a firm of legal executors who said that they would actually deal with the will. But of course, now he's in a position where the one of the executors that she put on, she can't find, because the firm that was there is now no longer there, and all of a sudden she can't move her property because she needs the authority of that executor. So we've got to hunt that person down first in order to get their authority so that she can actually physically sell. So sometimes we take steps in life that actually make it even more difficult, and you can simplify those steps by just taking it page at a time, right at the beginning, and say, this is what I think I'd like if this was to happen. Now, we know the inevitable to all of us is that one day we are all going to go. That is a fact of life that nobody can take away. It doesn't matter what happens, whether it's an illness, heart attack, pandemic, whatever happens, one day we're all going to go. So succession planning is about taking a step back and saying to yourself, what would I like to happen? Who would I like to operate that? Which member of family is going to gain from that? It's not a paper that you're publishing. It's a private paper between yourself and perhaps your legal, or your will writer, and you lodge it so that it's there on the system to say that one day, if that happens, you have a plan for whatever your assets are, whatever your members of the family are, and whoever that's going to be. Also, in order to mitigate some of the taxations, there may be trusts and other opportunities which you will need to take advice on from financial advisors, some guidance under the current laws. Laws constantly change, and therefore that paper, that document, may be a evolving document from the day you bought. So if you bought 20 years ago and it's now 20 years later, obviously the laws and the systems have changed, and you will need to continue to revisit it. But if you don't have it in the first place, you're not going to have something to revisit to make sure that that's kept in check. We always think we'll do it tomorrow, and unfortunately tomorrow sometimes is just a little bit too late, and then all of a sudden nobody's going to get anything out of it, and then you sit there and think, I wish I'd done this. So I thought it was a very, very important subject to bring to our program. I think it's very important that coming up to the end of 2020, which has been a difficult year, is probably an underlining statement for most, and if not, everybody. It should have given you time to think about what's happened in our lives this year, what's happened to our loved ones, what's happened to our our personal circumstances, and you've got a break coming up, and it's a seasonal break that actually makes you stop and think about potentially what should I be putting in place 2021. And we make a lot of New Year's resolutions every year about losing weight, because of course immediately after Christmas the adverts will come up to tell you that this is how you're going to lose weight, and there'll be other things to tell you that things that we do, but there won't be anyone there really saying to you, you know what, have you taken stock and thought about what could happen in 2021? We don't know. Nobody has that crystal ball. But what I would suggest that you should do is take stock of it, and ask yourself, do I have that structure in place? And if not, how do I do it? If you need to know, then contact me, and I will be happy to direct you and show you and introduce you to people that hopefully will give you that comfort, that guidance, that support, and help you create that infrastructure. It's something that we're all scared of doing. And I know for a fact that in our culture, certainly in the Asian culture, it's a huge no-no territory, primarily because we kind of don't trust the next person. That's the problem. And that's not maybe just us, it's just everybody. Trust is a huge thing. But you're going to have to do it at some stage, and you're going to need to do it with someone. And I think, if I probably said something out of turn, then I'll apologize here and now. But I'm sincere in what I'm saying, that I think it's very, very, very important that you take a little bit of time out, take stock, stop and think. Yes, there are people saying, yo, write this, do that, so forth. I think you should. I think you should definitely put a piece of paper down and sit down over a coffee and write down and think about, need to have that discussion. What would happen if this happens to us, or to you, or to me, or to our children, or whatever? And then have that lodged, because it will make life a lot easier going forward. And it would make life a lot easier if you put some sort of structure in place that allows your children to have a future, especially if you work so hard to try and gain the things you do. Now, I know it sounds like I've done a sermon here, and it's a one-way conversation, but I sincerely tell you that it's something that you should very, very seriously think about. And I'm happy to deal with any questions, any inquiries. And the number will be at the end. Those that know me know where to find me, and I'll happy to direct you to the people that I think will be able to help.
And a good property consultant will be connected and will have those connections, which is one way of trying to get some trust and some belief in the recommendations made. That's important. If I'm looking to find a person to help me with this area, should I take references? Should I look to talk to? Should I network to find out more about the person to try and find some route to be able to trust them?
Yes, I think, like I said, the operative word here is trust, and you want to trust the right person to give you that guidance, that thing. Do all your research. My message here is to take the action. I'm not saying that you want to take that action with me. You don't have to, but I'm available if you want me to help you. I can point you in the right direction. Our dreaded Google will give you lots and lots of people that will offer you sound advice and good advice. But I very rarely think that you would have had someone stand or sit on air and say to you, this is something that you should stop and think about. And that in itself should hopefully give you some indication of my sincerity as to what people should consider. Property matters, and property itself is very close to my heart. I've made a living out of it for 40 odd years. I've dealt with now 4 generations of people throughout that time. I know that, I've had these journeys. The stories I've just told you are genuinely true stories that have landed at my table. And if I was to give you a penny for every person that said, I wish I had done that this time, and I wish I had done that, which is why I'm here saying to you that it's something that you should do. So yes, by all means, make all your searches, go and talk to your lawyers that you have, take advice from your financial advisors as to what they are going to be. But if you don't have that guidance, you're not sure what to do, then of course I'm here as your property consultant, your consultant period, who has a lot of experience. I'm happy to point you and put you in front of potential people that I feel confident that I've known for years myself, that will be able to give you that guidance, that advice, and show you the right way, and making sure, and kids are a big thing in this, aren't they? Really, if you think about it, Paul. Something happens, who deals with that? And you might think it's going to be an aunt or whatever, but their circumstances might not be right either. So you have to think that, it's always easy to say, I'm going to put this burden on my sister or my cousin or my brother, or someone else is going to be able to do that. But their circumstances might not be that they're in a position to do that. So you really need to search the situation and decide in your mind, in your life, what is the right thing. And as I said, it's an evolving document. What you make a decision of today may not be the decision that's going to be ultimate, but you still have to have some foundation that should give you to create that. And I think that's quite relevant. It's quite important. And I hope that, that resonates with some people that have had circumstances and difficulties, not just this year, but in previous years, and realize that maybe that is something that we should have done then. And I'm sure there'll be people that will come forward and say that, that was something that it should have done in yesteryears, in time before.
So the important thing is to get good advice, but more importantly, do it now. Actually, when you were talking there, I was just thinking whether the Queen will resurrect in her speech at Christmas, whether she will actually resurrect the annus horribilis term from a few years ago. Because if there was ever a time to resurrect it, it would be this year.
Yeah, I had a cup of tea with Elizabeth the other day, and we discussed. And she said,
"That would never surprise me, Joe.
You're absolutely on the right track here." And even though I don't want to be able to say that to my subjects, I'm choosing you to go out and deliver that message. So this is my royal message to all of our listeners that do take advice and do act upon it sooner rather than later.
Time has beaten us again, Joe, but I think we've got some good news. We've got an exciting guest and an interesting guest joining us next week. Do you want to give us a little bit more?
Yeah, so we have a lineup of guests over the remaining of 2020, hopefully, Paul. Russell Grant is he heads the networking for the Asian Jewish Business Network, so interesting to get Russell's views generally across, because I think it's about communities and understanding that where my thoughts are they resonated in other communities and how they view assets and investment and in property. So I think that will be quite an interesting view to get, followed by hopefully a mortgage broker, which I'm trying to get on board to make sure that we can give some guidance on where the best deals might be and how to approach that and what is required. And of course, we'll be joined by Lalji Vicaria, who is the director of Solaria Architects, again covering some planning issues and advice as to how to actually ultimately build your dream home if you find that nice piece of land somewhere around in the countryside and design it. And those that look at things like grand designs, you never know what Lalji could come up with if you give him the chance and put pen to paper. So yeah, some interesting guests that we will continue to bring. And of course you got me, every week. So what can you do?
And what more could we want?
What more could you want?
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching this week. Please post your thoughts, of course, on our video. If you have any feedback for us, we'd love to hear from you. The email address is propertymatterstv@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Any thoughts for the show? Any things that you think we could include that would be of benefit and of interest to you as you watch on a Sunday morning? But time has beaten us, Joe. We must say goodbye. So thank you very much indeed, as always, for your contribution. Always welcome, and the main reason for us being here in the first place. So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next Sunday, and we're welcoming Russell Bahar from the Asian Jewish Business Network.